you are an entire person, whether you're a mother, whether you're, married to someone, not married to someone, whether you have a career, whether you're divorced, whether you're just starting out, graduating from college, you're a whole person when you're walking in the room. And we are taught to dim so much of us, especially in this area. And what I wasn't even like seeing or wasn't trusting, put it that way, I saw it and wasn't trusting the two could kind of live side by side, was that many of the clients I had that were struggling to identify why they were feeling not creative, why they were feeling not inspired, why they were struggling, possibly with their self-esteem and their confidence, that it was possibly directly tied to the fact that they had no energetic connection from the waist down, and not in a conscious way, right? Like, yes, they may have been having sex, but it's not like this understanding the energy and the power that lives in that area of our body.
I'm Casey Main, author, writer, and party girl turned spiritual junkie, and I'm dedicated to helping you better understand the most important and most complicated relationship you'll ever be in, the one you have with yourself. It's the only relationship that you're in for the entirety of your time here, and it affects every single aspect of your life. Yet it is the one most often overlooked. This podcast is here to help you explore that relationship, get to know yourself so you can accept yourself, heal yourself, and become a better version of yourself. So let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Better You podcast. I am your host, Casey Main, and as always, I just want to start by expressing some gratitude that you have chosen to listen to this podcast. Whether it's your first time or you've been following along for a while, it really does mean a lot to me. And I know I say that in every episode, but it really, truly does, because I know I have a bunch of podcasts that I subscribe to that I always want to listen to. And then sometimes I can't find the time, or you have these articles you want to read or shows or movies you want to watch. We just have so much stuff. We have so many options. And so if you're actually taking the time to listen to this podcast, it means you find value in it. And that really just makes me so happy, because while I personally and selfishly love having all these conversations, because I am very, very into better understanding myself, really the whole reason I'm doing this is for you guys, because I feel like it is part of my own personal mission to help others learn more about themselves, because it can just help our lives so much. It'll help our relationships. It'll help our work lives, just everything. It can just make life better, which is really one of my purposes here in this life. Before we jump into talking about the episode and today's show and kind of what we have coming up, I did want to just share a little bit more information about myself, because we do have new listeners. And so for those of you who don't know, I am also a writer, I guess, by my day job. And it's been a journey trying to build that up to a point where it can actually pay for my life. But I've really made some traction lately, so I'm really enjoying it. I'm a contributor for a couple popular sites. So Pop Sugar is the one most people have heard of. Also Yogi Approved, which is a really great online yoga platform and a yoga magazine. And so that's where I get to write about more of my spiritual topics. And then I've also written several articles for a new site that hasn't launched yet, but it focuses on couples and intimacy. So sex within relationships, which if you already follow my writing, I do tend to write a lot about sex because I find it fascinating, and I also am just not embarrassed to do so. So you can find all of my writing on my website, CaseyMain.com, or you can follow my Instagram handle, Casey Main Writes, WRITES. I usually post all the articles I've written. And then I also do some freelance work, and I've started to really build that up. And now I'm starting to work with some really cool companies. So one of them is Agoji Resistance Pants, which are these really cool workout pants that I actually tried and did a product review for Pop Sugar. And then we kind of kept the relationship going, and now I'm doing some other writing for them. But basically they're workout pants that you wear, and they have resistance bands built into them. So they run from your waist to your ankle all the way around your legs. And so it adds resistance to just any and every movement. So you can wear them for a workout and they will absolutely make it more intense. Like the first time I tried them, it was when we were all still in like total quarantine. And so I wore them for a workout I did in my garage that was like a high intensity type thing. And oh man, just even doing like any kind of jumping, or I was doing like high knees. And then, I felt it in my legs for sure. It made everything more intense. But the other way you can use them is just wear them like when you go for a walk, or if you're running errands or doing stuff around the house, and just that added resistance for every movement, like requires more energy and therefore you burn more calories. So they're really cool. I'm excited to be working with them. And then I've got my second call actually this afternoon with this newer company called Ryze, RYZE Superfoods, and they make a mushroom coffee. And what I love about this is like one of their founders is female, and so many of the large mushroom coffee brands are founded by men. And so nothing against men, but I do love to see, female CEO. But their mushroom coffee is a little bit different because it also has MCT oil in it. So it's like this combination of all the benefits of these different mushrooms, which if you haven't looked into that yet, like it's super cool. And I might start talking about it more on the show as I start to work with them. But then the benefits of the MCT oil, which is just really good for your brain. You hear a lot about MCT in like the keto world, but you don't have to be doing keto to reap the benefits of this, but it is, considered quote unquote keto friendly, meaning like it doesn't have any carbs. So I've tried it. It's really good. I'm excited to start working with them. And then I also have a book. So I am an author. The book is titled, I Gave Up Men for Lent, the story of a jaded, hopeless romantic, health conscious party girl's search for meaning. And that published in 2019, right? Yes. February 2019. So it's like a year and a half old. And it is a true story. It's kind of like a memoir, I guess, of hopefully just like the first third of my life. So I wrote it when I was 32. Is that right? I feel like it was. I wrote it in 2017. It published in 2019. Yeah, that makes sense. And the title makes it seem like it's only for women, but men have read it and enjoyed it as well. And it's really what launched this whole idea for this podcast, which is focused on better understanding our relationship with ourselves. Because it chronicles a big turning point in my life where I realized I was doing nothing with my relationship with myself. I didn't even realize I had a relationship with myself because I was so focused on absolutely every other relationship in my life. And it wasn't working out well. Like it goes through my complete relationship history, the major relationships in my 20s, and even back to actually like my first love in high school, and just the terrible decisions I made and how much I let other people's opinions run my life. And so it was really kind of this coming back to myself and reevaluating how I wanted to live my life and what I wanted for my future. And then it was writing that book that caused me to then eventually leave my job and head out into this freelance world and start my podcast and get all into personal development. So Cliff Notes version of kind of who I am and the work that I do. Just wanted to share with you guys, for those of you who don't already know a little bit about me. Okay. Enough about me. Let's talk about the podcast. So today we are talking a lot about like reconnecting to our bodies and our sensuality, and realizing that we need to see and address ourselves as like a whole person. And we talk about a lot more, but that's kind of the meat of it. And so I wanted to just let you guys know of a couple other past episodes we've done on similar topics in case you like want to go a little bit even deeper into this topic. So if you are, I would say, a little bit more spiritual or open to kind of the woo-woo world, then episode 60, Reclaim and Unleash the Divine Feminine Within You with Coltrane Lord, is a really good one to listen to. And then I've got 2 prior episodes that talk more specifically about sex and kind of the shame we have around it and how difficult it can be to talk about, like even with our partners. And so those episodes are 46. What Are You Really Bringing into the Bedroom and What Do You Want to? With sexologist Jill McDevitt. And so she actually, I don't know if you guys saw this, she actually just recently went a little bit viral because she had this social media post that compared people not wanting to wear masks to people not wanting to wear condoms. And then that got picked up all over the place. So she has since gone a little bit viral and very happy for her. And then episode 34, Live Your Best Sex Life with Asharna Walsh. That's a really good one. I know that's kind of going back into the archives. Asharna is the founder of sexual wellness app Coral, which is a really cool app. And so that actually, that brings up a good point that if you are struggling with the sex within your relationship, there are a lot of apps out there. And when I say struggling, I mean, that can look a lot of different ways. Like maybe you guys aren't having sex as much as you want to be, or somebody in the relationship wants to be. That's a common problem. Or maybe you just have a hard time really dropping into your body, really kind of being in the moment because you're thinking about a million other things, or maybe you're just not totally fulfilled or satisfied with your sex life. There are so many apps out there that will help either you address it with your partner or you and your partner together, like as a couple, address it. So I actually wrote an article. That's one of the articles I did for the new site that we'll be launching on couples and sexuality. So make sure you are following me, my writing handle, as well as the podcast socials. But if you're following me, you'll see when those articles go up because that site has not gone live yet. Okay, so I know I'm getting a little bit long-winded here. Real quick, though, before we get into the bio and kind of what we're talking about in this episode. So I believe I have confirmed a super exciting guest. I think she's going to do it. We haven't had our pre-call yet or ironed out an interview time, but I think it's going to happen. It's Andromeda Peters, who was actually Miss United States from 2018. And she's just super cool individual. So she's also a therapist, and then she's very into the personal development world and has some really cool things going on. So fingers crossed I can nail down that interview because I just know I've heard her on a couple other podcasts and she's amazing. So if you are not already subscribed, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss future episodes. Okay. So let's talk about today's guest, Anjua Maximo. Oh, I loved her. I absolutely loved having this conversation. It was as a manager for fitness apparel giant lululemon Athletica that Anjua first fell in love with personal development. What she learned about leadership and entrepreneurship inspired her to join forces with her husband in launching a business venture in 2015 that became GrooveRyde, Cleveland's premier boutique micro gym. While GrooveRyde's mission to transform you from the inside out was a labor of love, Anjua's true passion lies with her Electric Life personal development and leadership courses and Pure Mvmnt classes. In 2014, she became a certified life and leadership coach through the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. From teaching women to create a powerful vision for their lives to guiding them to a positive and powerful connection to their sensual energy, she has found ways to use movement and personal development to coach the whole woman. And in this episode, we discuss the two major moments that changed the direction of her life, how our childhood views and expectations of what we should look like can impact our connection to our bodies and our sexuality, how reconnecting with our bodies through movement can lead to major emotional breakthroughs, our tendency to compartmentalize certain parts of ourselves, especially our sexuality and sensuality, all the mixed messages we get about our sexuality and how that impacts our view of ourselves, the importance of loosely holding on to goals so we can flow more with life, what it means to live an electric life, the power of making friends with and trying to understand the negative voice in your head, the importance of understanding your energy and identifying the energetic drains in your life, and how we need to identify and question the values that were placed upon us and choose which values that are right for our lives. All right, so I know this is a little bit longer intro than usual, so we are going to go ahead and jump into this amazing and fun conversation with Anjua. So we'll jump right into everything. I want to start with a little bit of just your background and kind of how you got into this work, just so we can all get to know you a little bit better.
I would say that my first ever introduction to anything personal development wise was in Los Angeles. And um, I was working for, I had discovered, I should say, a sensual movement studio. Back then we were just calling it pole dancing though. And yeah, now it's sensual embodiment. Back then it was just pole dance. So I discovered this studio at recommendation of a friend, and I call it personal development because in all honesty, that was what was actually going on, even though at the time I don't believe we realized that. So it was in a different sense, and I'll get into that more, what kind of personal development that was, but essentially it had to do with the body and your connection to your body, your sensuality, your sexuality. And then fast forward to shortly after that, beginning to work at Lululemon in California as well. And that was my first official, introduction into personal development proper, like what we know it to be as far as vision and goals and leadership and accountability and all these things that I'd never really heard of, thought of, even thought to think of, just nothing. So those two moments were probably the most impactful to leading me to where I am today, and very much influenced so much of my business as a boutique fitness studio owner with my husband for GrooveRyde. It definitely influenced how I decided to lead my own sensual embodiment workshops. So yeah, it all just started back in LA about 10 years or more ago.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask you, just because I'm kind of curious, how old were you when those two moments kind of happened? Like, did they happen around the same time?
Yeah, it's so interesting you asked that because it was really a very interesting time in my life when I was stepping away from what I thought I was going to be for the rest of my life, which was an actor, and stepping away from that whole world, that whole identity. I had just had a baby and I was about 35 is what I want to say, 35 years old. So about 10 years ago. Yeah. And, it was just, you're 35 and you're kind of like, what is it that I say? In my 20s, I still feel like we're just like bigger babies. We're still trying to
Yeah.
figure so much out, and it's like the infancy stage of adulthood. So we kind of go back to one, right? And in your
hmm
30s, I felt like I was really starting to realize some things that were just not true for me anymore. Um, and so it just was like divine intervention that all these things kind of came into my path at a time when I was transitioning away from a life that I thought was going to be one thing, and not really sure on what my next steps were, but very open to receiving whatever. So, as a woman, being a first time mom, getting to know this new body, getting to understand, I loved my fullness. Like there were so many things happening in my body and in my mind. And it just was, boom, here you go. Here are the tools to help you kind of flesh out what's actually happening.
Okay. I have like goosebumps as you say that because I resonate with that so much. So I'm 36, and it was when I was 32 that I had a similar, I mean, I didn't have anything as big as like becoming a mom or anything, but I started that transition you just said of realizing like the life I was living in my 20s wasn't right for
Mm-hmm.
me anymore. And all of a sudden started to really think about life in a bigger way and more kind of what am I doing and where do I want to go? And so it was like this big, like, aha moment or time period for me.
Yeah.
And what's funny is prior to that, I was very anti anything personal development, like literally would make fun of it all the time. Like it was just not my thing. I had a friend try and get me to watch The Secret and I made her turn it off
Yeah.
after a minute. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And so now I just find that so funny that now like that's the world I'm in. Like prior to that moment for you, were you neutral about personal development? Had you never thought of it? Or were you like me where you
I
were
didn't even know
like
what it was.
against it?
I actually, in my early 20s, I hadn't even really heard of it. I didn't even, personal development wasn't even a word. Now, funny enough, my father was actually falling into spirituality um, when I was in my 20s. And I guess maybe that was an introduction into it. And I also was like, okay, Dad, like he took me to a chanting thing and I was I was like, what's going
Right.
on? And I was like, are you having a midlife crisis? Like, what are we doing here? But, I also I love that he was finding some kind of peace is what I also saw. And so I was very open to it. And I think I had always been, oh my gosh, this is all just occurring to me. I'm a liar. No, that's not true. I just don't think I knew that's what it was. And then
Yeah.
there was this weird movie that came out when I was in my early 20s, I want to say, and it was with Shirley MacLaine, and it was another one The Secret, Out on a Limb. And I was like, oh, and it was the same kind of way out there. I don't know, she met an alien in the Aztec desert. It was all kinds of things were happening. And I remember loving it though. So I guess in a sense, I've always been very open to the idea that there is more to how we vibrate, so to speak, on this earth. I just didn't know. I didn't have a name for it. I just thought it was kind of that out there stuff is all I would say. And my dad, like I said, was the first to maybe introduce me to actual chanting and the idea that we can, maybe shift our mindset and our energy. But formally, not until I met Lululemon.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, all right. So I want to talk a little bit about your first sensual movement studio experience, which that's so funny. I didn't know the name had changed. So I think I told you in our pre-call, I did a couple pole dancing classes back when I lived in South Florida. One, because I knew it would be good exercise, but also I think even before I went through my personal development wake up, I knew I felt disconnected from my body or disconnected from my sexuality in the sense that I didn't feel like I was sexy. I didn't feel like I could move sexy. I never felt like I looked very sexy. And so I was hoping that taking that class would help with that. And it was really hard for me even there, among a small group of people with, lights very dim. It was very, very difficult for me to let go. So when you first experienced it, was it this, freedom moment, or did you struggle to really tap into that part of you as well?
I literally came home floating. I thought I had stumbled into the greatest secret that women just didn't know existed. I literally did. And I do think though, I think for me, my intentions it was very much about, I love strip clubs. I mean, I hung out with them, in LA. It was pretty common even that you just
went. It was pretty common in South Florida too. I've spent a good, number of nights
Florida for sure. Oh, for sure. And you just kind of, you went and met people for drinks there, and people are dancing in the back, and you just didn't really even pay attention. So it wasn't a big deal. And I always thought they were kind of fun. And I loved going with my husband at the time, and we would have fun. And he was very familiar with that world too. So when I got the referral to go from a trainer friend of mine, I was like, yeah, I'll go. But it was with the intention that I was like, okay, we're going to bring this back to the bedroom. We're going to have some fun, and maybe I'll get a pole and I'll learn some cool tricks or something, and it'll be fun. And at the time, I was actually, I don't want to say very comfortable in my body. I was comfortable with my sexuality. My body was something that I neither fought with or fell in love with. It was kind of I poked at it sometimes. Sometimes I'd feel good about it. There were periods of time growing up where I actually hated how skinny I was, and didn't really appreciate just how I was drawn until much later. So, growing up, my body was in some, I would cover it up to try to look bigger, big baggy clothes, to look tougher, to look less fragile, less I could be, intimidated or even taken down. That was very, in growing up in New York, I just think energetically as a female, you just were always on alert. And to me, I just felt like I was very vulnerable because I just felt skinny. And never mind the fact there was the whole piece where, growing up, Afro-Latina woman, culturally, just Black Latino men love curves. Yeah. And the more you have,
whereas
the
I'll
better.
tell you, growing up white, I wished I was really skinny. because
Right. So, oh
yeah,
my
I
God,
had a
I have
totally
this
different
conversation
experience.
with my white girlfriends all the time. They're like, they got made fun of for my butt. I'm like, men would
Yep.
propose to you all over New York for your ass. You have no
Yep.
idea.
Oh yeah. No, 100%. I would get made fun of by the boys in my little grade school about having a big butt, and then thank God, like J-Lo came on the scene, and so by the time I got in high school, it was like a good thing. But
Yeah.
I definitely like for most of my younger life wished that I was thin.
Isn't that crazy? Like total body
Yeah.
dysmorphia. Like I was just like, I want ass for days. I mean, I remember going, like it was that like, the like, itty bitty titty committee and all these weird songs that we would
Oh,
sing
yep.
in camp and
Yep.
things like that. And I would like wish that I had boobs like Wonder Woman. I would say that went all the way out to there, like just crazy things in my little head. So I think by the time I found the sensual movement class, really what was going on with me, I think what I didn't recognize I had been living in all this time was the idea that my sexuality was there to please the male gaze.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I got to that class that I suddenly was like, oh, I don't even want to share this with him. Like, this is mine. Like this whole
I love
experience
that.
is mine. And it was very freaking new to think that way for me, because prior to that, everything was like, is that boy looking at me? I mean, no guy looked at me when I walked in. Maybe I don't look cute. It's just all this hyper consciousness about
Yes.
getting the validation externally. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't until that class that I was like, I don't care. Like, I was loving having this experience with other women and it being like our thing with nothing
I love
attached. It
that.
was awesome.
And so then now that is what so now you have your own studio. So fast forward, you had that
Exactly.
experience, you go home floating, and then now you have your own studio, correct?
Yep. Like many years later. And I got a little sidetracked there because I got very heavily involved with Lululemon and becoming a manager and had goals set there to, hopefully get on their training team and be part of their development team. And, because that was what I was falling in love with, even more so than the business side of what they were teaching me there. And so this was always on my goal sheet, but it just kept getting pushed out. It's something that
Mm-hmm.
I do when I got everything else done. So it wasn't until, again, another moment of recognition, life shifting, that I kind of was like, okay, it's time to do this now. And that was about 5 years ago.
What was that moment?
That moment was realizing that goals are amazing and goals are there to guide us. They are there to, I would say, help us make sense of all the ideas we have in our head and which direction to take them in. However, I believe and have come to really understand that they are meant to be held lightly. So by that, I
Yes. I
mean,
think,
right?
yes.
We're not going to like hold on to it because it has to look this way. So by the time I was coming to about my 5th or 6th year working for Lululemon, things suddenly just started to shift interest wise with me. Parts of in all honesty, parts of my performance on the business side were not as strong as my performance on the development side with my team. And it was just becoming apparent that that role was just not a good fit for me. And suddenly, where I was feeling so much freedom in a role that I had loved and with a company I still do love and respect greatly for what they shared with me, it just was suddenly to feel like a wrong pair of shoes. So at that moment was when, I was like, I think it's time. And funny enough, my husband was going through a very similar experience with his job. And, he was like, well, I want in on that studio with you and help. And I'm like, but it's for women. Like, that's awkward. I don't need you on the front desk. Like, I
This is
really
my
wanted
own
to
thing.
be,
This has nothing to
this
do
is
with
my thing. Go get your own studio. And in a sense, that's kind of how GrooveRyde started, though. He was like, well, I'm into cycle. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'll open up next door. We'll have like connecting adjoining bathrooms and we'll kind of share the same space, but it'll be 2 different studios. And that's kind of how the whole thing got started with GrooveRyde and Pure Mvmnt. But yeah, I went and got certified in life coaching because I felt that one component that was definitely missing for me in the early time when I was teaching in Los Angeles, the sensual movement classes, was we just didn't have enough instruction and support around how to guide some of the women that were
Mm-hmm.
experiencing some really serious, like amazing breakthroughs.
Mm-hmm.
There were women that were definitely there that, they just loved it and they were having a good time. And maybe it was about doing it for husbands, boyfriends, whatever, significant others. And then there were those, those of us there that, were really feeling like epiphanies were happening while we were dancing and tears are happening and all this emotions coming up because we're unlocking energy in our body by moving in a way
Yes.
that's so intentional, right? And so beautiful. But at the same time, we as teachers, and understandably so, like no accusations at all, because they didn't realize this was going to lead to that. I mean, it was literally
Mm-hmm.
happening before our eyes. And we're like, what do you mean this happened in class? I'm like, I don't know. She broke open and it was this crazy moment and I didn't know what to say. And that's when I was like, okay, I need more. I need more. So I went through a coaching program, took those tools, combined what I knew from Lululemon, what they taught me, all the amazing free workshops, seminars, things that they continue to spill into me, and just found ways to weave it into guiding these women that I was now going to teach into asking more reflective questions about, the origins of their thoughts around their body, their sexuality, their sensuality, in hopes that these prompts would help them, start to peel away a little bit more. And,
Mm-hmm.
in those moments, in those breakthroughs, to not be so fearful of it, to recognize that this was the shaking loose of something.
Mm-hmm. I love your story so much and I love even how you said, like, you got sidetracked from the goal of the Sensual Movement Studio because you got all into Lululemon. But if you think about it, like, that was totally perfect because now you've like combined the, kind of the business component and the coaching stuff that you learned from Lululemon, and then you've supplemented that with actual coaching. But a lot of times I know in the business world, and I don't know about so much in just the coaching world in general, but I think they leave out the connection to body part. Like in the business world, they definitely do. But then it's like you've tied them both together. So you're really looking at a whole person, including the sensuality and sexuality, which I think is often not included.
100%. Well, here's the thing. It's like, that's even like one of the phrases I use is that I'm coaching the whole woman. And even though women, initially, even myself initially, when I rolled it out, I thought I had to compartmentalize it because my feeling was, oh, if they're coming for me for business coaching or, career coaching, that part might make them uncomfortable. So that'll be something separate for women who are looking specifically for that.
Mm-hmm.
Except that was actually directly preaching, going against what I was preaching, which was I'm in the room saying you are an entire person, whether you're a mother, whether you're married to someone, not married to someone, whether you have a career, whether you're divorced, whether you're just starting out, graduating from college, you're a whole person when you're walking in the room. And we are taught to dim so much of us, especially in this area. And what I wasn't even like seeing or wasn't trusting, put it that way, I saw it and wasn't trusting the two could kind of live side by side, was that many of the clients I had that were struggling to identify why they were feeling not creative, why they were feeling not inspired, why they were struggling, possibly with their self-esteem and their confidence, that it was possibly directly tied to the fact that they had no energetic connection from the waist down.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a conscious way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, they may have been having sex, but it's not like this understanding the energy and the power that lives in that area of our body. Not understanding how our muscles hold emotion and trauma and how all these things go hand in hand. Like now when I coach people, I actually will, I invite them to put their hands on their body when they're feeling anxious. I invite them to use their hands the same way I teach them in Pure Movement, to use them in their everyday life to calm themselves, to center themselves, to validate, to love on themselves. Same hands that I say we turn on everybody else for comfort and help and love. We just don't turn them on ourselves. So I've now managed to find a way to say, no, this is something you need to understand that when the voice starts talking in your head, I call it the gremlin. where is it starting in your body first? Before it even hits your head, you feel something in your body first.
Yeah. So why do you think it is that so many of us get disconnected from our bodies in general, and then especially, our bodies from the waist down? Like, where do we lose it? Does it come back to kind of what we were saying before, where we're constantly comparing our bodies, our level of sexiness or whatever, compared to what society is telling us it should be? Is it rooted in shame that stems from, who knows what shame messages we've picked up along the way? Like, why do we get to this point of disconnection?
It's all those things. It's all those things. And, I'm not going to say that men or, the males don't have that, something going on their side too. But I just personally feel that for young women, for any female child, it is a different situation trying to grow up in this world. For me, that first time was when I first got whistled at or like hollered at. I was probably
Mm-hmm.
about maybe 9. And there were like a group of boys that were maybe slightly older than me sitting on a car. And I'm walking by with my boy cousins. And they like whistled and like, doing all the kissy noises. And I kind of panicked. And I felt I felt like prey,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew enough of what boys could do to women, to girls. And so I remember running upstairs and crying, like just burying myself in the bed and crying. And my cousins like told my other, my older cousin, like what happened. And she came in and, she didn't know. She's trying to explain to me, well, it's just what boys do when they like you. But it was such an uncomfortable feeling for me that I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't feel like I don't feel liked.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I feel
if
preyed
that's what they
upon.
do when they like me, it feels like shit. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't like it. It felt horrible. It was terrifying to me. So, it became, I think at that point that I both recognized that my body was in some sense like this thing disconnected from me that men were going to look at a very young age, grown men looking at you, and that you were unsafe in your body was just the messaging I got or
Mm.
felt. And I think from that moment, for me, I can only speak for myself, is where I was hyper conscious of both the power of my body, fearful of it and intrigued by it and didn't know what to do with it. Understood that, if I wanted to dress a certain way because I just love to wear miniskirts, that this was going to now invite a whole lot of trouble and energy. So it's like all these conscious decisions of how I had to dress in the morning to make sure that on my walk to school, I wasn't going to, like, shit, guys aren't thinking like this, you know?
Yeah. And so that's the kind of like trauma and emotion that gets just stuck and trapped energetically.
Yeah, I do. I believe that's that thinking. Then you're gonna layer on whatever messaging your parents give you and your family, whether or not they're giving you the whole Madonna whore scenario, telling good
Mhm.
girls act like this, bad girls act like that. Then you're getting what you're learning and reading and watching in media. And again, they
Mhm.
love to just make us so one dimensional. This is the slut. This is the good girl. This is, it's crazy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And it's in music. It's in, it's just so, you get so many mixed messages. Like, we love the sex symbols. We love the J-Los, right? We love her. And then you've got people who are like, she's shameful. She needs to stop, showing her body, but that she's empowered. Like, I mean, as a young woman, like, what are you supposed to, if you even do feel drawn to, well, I think this is my opinion, there's someone out there that's ready to judge it and comment on it. And it's an exhausting, I believe, way to exist in the world. And then you've got to compound that with just natural biological things that we go through as young women, which there is a natural tendency to compete with each other at the age about 12 and
Yep.
on up. It's just a natural thing. It's a natural thing to be attracted to boys at that age and start to compete for their attention by preening and doing things with our bodies and wanting to show more. But it's, my thing is, we do lots of things that are naturally, that are natural. That doesn't excuse us from putting some kind of guidance around these feelings that are coming up, though, so that we don't teach our girls that while it may be natural to compete, it doesn't need to be. So does that make sense?
It does. And now I'm just kind of going through my head of like, okay, like what's my story here? And it totally makes sense if I put all the puzzle pieces together. So, like I mentioned before, like the boys in gym class, like made fun of how we all wore like the little cotton Sophie shorts back then. And mine kind of went up a little bit in the back cause I had a butt. And I don't know how old I was, but this was around the age where all the other girls were getting boobs. Well, like I'm still waiting for my boobs to come in. Like it's not happening. So I think right there, I learned like I have curves in the wrong places. Like my body is not what it's supposed to be. Then I think when big butts became a good thing, at least for white women, then all of a sudden I started getting a lot of attention and I had no idea how to handle it. And it made me like super uncomfortable. And I'm still to this day, like uncomfortable when I get complimented. And I think I'm like I don't think I don't love my body. I wish I did, but I'm not there. And I don't hate it. Like I'm kind of indifferent towards it. Like it is what it is. Like it could be better. It could be worse. And I think it's really interesting if you think back to like, what do you remember from childhood? And then how do those, and then I remember like my mom from like, her whole thing was like, girls don't call boys, like boys are supposed to pursue you. Right. So then like, but then when they did pursue me, then I felt uncomfortable because I thought I don't have the right type of body. It was like, I don't know. It's all kind of a mess.
But do you see what I'm saying? Like the fact that you were even having to run through all of these thoughts for something that should be as simple as, I like a boy, he likes me. Yeah. So we just go out. But we can't. Like it just becomes this crazy thing in our heads. And it's just so much. It's like so much information, so much what we should judgment, shame. Even what you're saying too, like I thought things were in the wrong place in my body. What
that's
you
a crazy statement when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It's like, yeah, this is my body. But I mean, girl, and I was right there with you. My nickname in 4th or 5th grade was, I was a carpenter's dream because I was flat and never been screwed.
Oh,
like, God. Really? Oh my God. Seriously right now? Come on, guys. Like we can do so much better. Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, that's just kids. And I'm like, that stuff sticks with you. Yeah. It sticks with you. And in somewhere it's living in some cranny of your brain, right? Formulating all kinds of stuff for when you get older and just becoming part of this crazy idea that you grow up thinking about yourself. I mean, I think the same thing goes for guys. When I hear, well, this is the way they're wired. No, they're wired that way to look at your butt. Casey, don't you know? It's just what they're wired to do. But it's like, well, they may be wired that way biologically, but we can, again, also learn what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, regardless of what biologically we may be wired to do.
Right. Like, I would say they're more mentally and programmed by society from a very young age that's what they do.
Well, if you read this book, though, have you heard of the female brain?
No. Who's it by?
Okay. So I believe it's by Dr. Bernadette. I'm going to mess up her last name. It's like,
I think maybe I have heard of this book, actually.
It's like Bernadette Berzadine or something like that. And I have to look it up. I always mess up her last name, but she,
that's all right. I'll look it up. I'll put it in the show notes.
Please do. She goes through how our brains are wired differently, male and female. And it was fascinating because there were certain things that I thought were taught that she's saying, no, are actually just part of our biology. Like even men looking for the curvier shape and the hips, because biologically it was instilled in men that meant she was a fertile female.
Interesting.
Yeah, like wild stuff. And even like to the point where she, at one point, this one really blew my mind because I kind of laughed about this. She was like, and women, in a way, we're even programmed to cry a certain like amount more than men when we're in conflict, because it's a demonstration of what we're feeling, and men tend to need a visual to understand what's going on.
Oh,
right? I was
like I don't want to believe that because I don't want to be biologically programmed to cry when I'm angry, but I do cry when I'm angry. And you know what? Like, especially like my boyfriend, I mean, he hates to see me cry. Like visually, he really does respond to that. It's like, it is a Like it'll stop him in his
what
tracks. Yeah.
happened? And it changes everything, right? But if it was just a straight up argument, you could be saying the same thing and you're like, he's not getting it. He's not getting it. And suddenly you cry. And then it's at least an opening to a softening. I know. I was kind of annoyed too. I was like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to
I don't want that to be. So, okay.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah.
So that's all right. So that's interesting. You're right. This dates back to like childhood, society, family, messaging, our personal experiences along the way that are then shaped by that early messaging. And all this starts to disconnect us from our bodies, tie into the fact, like just all the, how busy we are, how distracted we are, how stressed we are. That's why like mindfulness has become a thing to try and get us to just all slow down and reconnect with their bodies. But what I'm guessing about like a sensual movement studio, as opposed to trying to like sit and meditate or some of the other mindfulness practices that is all more in our head, this is kind of approaching it from a movement standpoint, which I can imagine how powerful that would be, because then you're really moving the energy.
Oof. It is one of, I would say, the most beautiful, powerful things is to see a woman close her eyes. I start the music and she literally goes somewhere else, but I can read everything that's happening in her body. She's talking through her movement. You can feel where she's sad. You can feel when she's feeling incredibly powerful and sexy, where she's owning it. You can feel when she's angry, just by how she is moving into the music. And, that's what we do. We teach them a language, so to speak, through their body, a body language. And there's, basic steps that I may teach you, or a moving guided meditation that I will lead you through on the mat. But the idea is that you start to get so familiar with the movements yourself that eventually you just start to make up your own sentences, right? Using the movement, not consciously, but letting your body lead you, an intuitive genius in you, just lighting up and feeling like she's leaning to the right. That's the way I'm going. And you're not ever going to doubt it. You just go with it. And when you're in that space, I mean, you open your eyes. I've had people feel like they just went somewhere else. They're like, that's, and again, it's the part at the end that you've got a room full of women, or at the time when we could be a room full of anything, yelling and cheering you on, but not the way men catcall and holler at us, like in a like sisterly. I mean, it's like you're at the world's greatest games and they're screaming for you to go.
I love that.
And there's nothing at the end of it. There's nothing you owe anyone. There's no expectation. I think that's the piece that's the most important to me, is that you can show it to anyone you choose to. You can use it for any reason you choose to. And I always invite people to start with just letting it be about you, because that is something we're never taught as women. I believe that anything we do sexually is for ourselves.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And so your plan is to open your next studio down here in Jacksonville, Florida, right? Is that right?
Okay. So what, actually right now, I like how you slid that in. So right now we actually are taking everything online. So I'm not even in studio with the movement right now. But I am offering the classes for the first time virtually, and not talk about holding things lightly. I'm an in-person kind of person. I need to see, feel. I mean, my job is to read your body, and now you're asking me to do that through a screen. And so there was a little bit of, I had to let go of some of how I used to do things and trust that it would work. And we just did 2 of our introductory classes last week, and they loved it. And I was like, okay, so it does translate. So I'm excited to bring it to hopefully more women that I know wanted to try it, have wanted to try it. We're like, I'm not anywhere near Cleveland. Are you coming to Montana? I'm like, no, I'm not coming anywhere anytime soon. Not yet. But now hopefully there's an opportunity for women to try this, and in the comfort of their home, which I think kind of adds another layer to it. Even though I do love the camaraderie and what happens, that sisterhood that happens in this space, I'm looking forward to creating that in some form through an online community.
Yeah. And that's just, I'm with you. I'm an in-person kind of person when it comes to any activity like this. But unfortunately, we're, it's just the world we live in right now. And so you have to be able to pivot. And I love your point about like not holding too tightly onto goals or being attached to like the way things are, like having that fluidity in how you approach life, I think, is really important now more than ever, but probably just always.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, so many of my clients that I've been coaching around vision have struggled lately because their fear. I
Mm-hmm.
don't what we're living different times. I don't know what to create for next year for myself. And my pushback to them is that even if there were no pandemic, you technically wouldn't know what was happening next year either.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
That's true.
what is the essence of what it is that you want for yourself? What is
Mm-hmm.
the feeling? What was the ultimate experience you wanted to have with that goal? Because if you can nail that down and I was looking to feel more confident, and I was hoping to find a certain kind of freedom, then you know that actually the essence of it can be picked up and placed into another actual vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like those ends goals versus means goals or whatever. Like kind of like the
Right.
bigger picture, what you're really going
Yeah.
after in a bigger picture can be applied to more things than you probably realize, as long as you identify like what that bigger picture result you want
Literally,
is.
that is how I reinvented myself so many times, that I understood through each iteration of who I was, that what the through line was. I was really amazing at connecting with others, seeing their potential and possibility, and helping them pull it out. No matter if I was helping friends with auditions back when I was an actor, as I segued into becoming a fitness instructor and having success there and a connection with, I would get all the difficult clients. She's great with them. She's got a velvet hammer. I don't know how she does it. Give them to Anjua. And then in Lululemon, it was again the same role. But it's funny because if you actually look, I bet you could trace whatever that is for you all the way back to childhood. As I can actually take it back to when I was a kid, of being in that position consistently of helping others. So once I realized that was the essence of really what it was that I did, even when it was time for me to leave LA and that original studio, it was like, well, what am I going to do now? Well, what is it that you're here to do? You're here to teach and lead and help others find that same exact thing. And that can look like a lot of things, whether you're at Lululemon, whether you open your own studio, whether you go do it through, I don't know, managing a Target. It doesn't matter if
Mm-hmm.
that's the essence of what it is that you're here to do, your purpose.
Yes. Okay. So that's a perfect segue. Let's talk a little bit about your coaching, because you use the phrase electric life a lot. So
Yeah.
what does electric life, what does that mean?
Okay. I'm going to tell you a secret. It's actually inspired by Prince.
Oh,
And
nice.
electric life
Okay.
means forever, from Purple Rain. And one of my favorite songs. I've just always loved that verse and that phrase. To me, what that means is living a life where you feel content, excited, you're doing things intentionally, you're recognizing where you are with your body, your mind, and you're actively doing things to support yourself. So it's being in that work in the most graceful way possible, right? So we're not driving anything home, we're not beating anything into ourselves, we're not living a life that's supposed to look perfect. That's not what I'm implying at all. I had a horrible day on Monday, and those moments are going to happen, but what I have now is this little mini arsenal of tools and things that I call on when I recognize I'm in that place. It's me understanding that I have now only surrounded myself with the most amazing supportive people who are going to be able to help me as I've helped them numerous times when I'm in those moments. So to me, electric life is really just finding what is your joy, what is your contentment, what is your purpose, but not about perfection. I had a client ask the other day, like, is there ever a point where I'm not going to be mad at myself, or I'm never not going to hear the voice? And I had to be honest, in my opinion, no. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of how we're, our psyche. It's part of just the way that we think and kind of get around things in our head. It's just now that you have more knowledge of it, it doesn't take us down. And eventually we get faster and stronger at quieting those voices, at moving through the funk. We get better at identifying when we have to be in choice of living in the funk a little bit, because that's where we want to be, and it's okay. And then noticing and realizing we've been in it too long, don't unpack and live there. Now it's time to come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a certain awareness of all those things.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that so much of our brains and just kind of how I don't, it's probably part how we're wired and part how we're programmed is to, always like finish something, push through something, be done with something, like check it off, like it's finished. And I've found like I'm constantly relearning the lesson that like the work is never done. And that's part of the work, is accepting, like you said, like the voices in your head that are negative or that are all like ego driven, like they're always going to be there. And it's just about it's just a matter of awareness, so that you're not like so close to them that they've like become you, and you're aware that they're there and therefore they're bigger than you. And then, the bad moments, bad moments and the bad days are going to come. And it's not a matter of like, because I think I would, in an attempt to move past it, really just repress it, never deal with it. And then that's not it either. You almost have to maybe sit in it for a little bit, however long that little bit is. But then, like you said, you can't live there. So it's like this constant just accepting like what life is bringing and processing it, but not like living in it.
Yes, exactly. Like moving from knowing you could be an observer a lot. You don't have to be like in the throes of all of it all the time. But just really quick to touch back on even the voice, like I teach people to friend it. I do, because it's going to be there. So we might as well get to know why it shows up, what it's triggering, what's triggering it, what's setting it off. I want to know all the things about it. I want to keep it a little bit closer to me, actually, because I want to know what its actual intention is. And in my perspective, the voice is there in some very odd, very messed up, misguided way to try to protect you. To
yes,
stop you
I believe
from
that.
Feeling, right? The negative you felt the first time it arrived. Right. Whatever shame, embarrassment, anger, frustration, hurt it was created in, it doesn't want you to experience anything like that again. So it just has a beautiful way of showing up right when there's a possibility of any of that ever happening. So it's almost like that. I describe it as the overbearing mother. She means well, right? But she's literally bubble wrapping your ass to get on a bike ride. She's like, call me every 5 minutes. And you stifling me, woman. Like, I can't breathe. But her intentions are good.
Yeah.
She does. Her intentions are so good, but she's smothering you. Right. So that to me, it's just accepting that these things are there. People are going to die. We're going to have hard times. We're going to fail. Things are just not going to work out, but it's where are we with all of that? Like, how do we handle it? How are we processing it? How are we giving ourselves space and grace to be in that process? That's the piece that I feel is important. And that's what it means to me to live that electric life. It's just being fully immersed and aware of all those things and welcoming them all, because you got to go through it. It's going to go somewhere. And if you stop it down, it's just going to come up later on to be healed somewhere on some inconvenient moment. You know what I mean? It's like,
it'll come back up for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's like that bad burp. Like it just comes up and you're like, oh, thought I was done with that, but no, there it is.
Okay. So there's the voice, the gremlin in our head, but then you also talk about, from an energetic standpoint and how they're like energy obstacles. So like, how do you help, like, how do we start to identify those? Cause like, I'm a big believer in, all things are energy. We are energetic beings living in an energetic world. And, there's the chakras and all that. But then I kind of don't know what to do with that information further than that.
Right. Well, if you know that, then you know that energy can be drained. Mm-hmm. Right. You know that if you're vibrating with energy through all those areas of you, that that energy can be taken, drained, depleted. And so the energy obstacles that I speak about in this course is basically like your environment, like what is literally sucking your energy drive from your environment, what obstacle is being created, whether it's, you live in too small quarters, whether it's, you've got no heat, it's too hot. It's just what's going on. That's actually, these are almost things that you don't think about, honestly, that how they're going to affect you in your day to day. Then there's your physical energetic obstacle. Are you eating correctly? And when I say correctly, I mean like eating for what you need, what's good for you. I'm not saying you got to go be vegan or paleo or anything. I'm just like, are you feeding yourself well? Are you sleeping?
Yeah, like,
are you just physically taking care of yourself? Because again, that is a number one drain. You know that if we don't care for the body, everything else is going to go to hell, right? Then you've got your mental energetic drains, and that is just that can show up from you being put in a position that you don't feel you're quite qualified for, or you weren't properly trained for. So now you're working overtime to try to prove that you can do it, even though you're feeling like you're scrambling. Like that's a mental drain. Instead of just asking for help or letting them know, I need more support here, you're going to hide it and get stuck in looking good and try your hardest to not let anyone know that you weren't ready for that position. That's a mental drain. You've got emotional drains, and that's just dealing with the stuff that you don't want to deal with, the feelings you don't want to deal with, the feedback you don't want to give that person, or, the point of view you don't want to share about how you were hurt. Those are all, you're swallowing it. Those are all emotional obstacles. And then you've got your social energetic drain, and that's going to come from the people you surround yourself with, people you work with, people in your family, the people who are in any way whatsoever energetically draining you, whether it's because of their own negativity or, how they're treating you specifically, their fear being imposed on you. So those are the types of things I'm referring to. So you could have all this knowledge of your chakras, of all these beautiful things energetically, but there's these other drains that are in our day to day that if we don't actually address them, are going to be whittling away at that same energy. It's almost like gnawing away like tiny mice.
Well, and have you found that like our just like kind of innate flow of energy or how much we have, like, does it change over time? Because like I've realized at this phase of my life, I will like the social component drains so much energy for me. And it's not even necessarily about who I'm with. It's just, I've recognized I need alone time to like balance out from social interactions, which could not be further from like the entire decade of my 20s when I was a little social butterfly and probably never alone. And now I've just realized like I've got to have that balance. And I mean, and for a while I kind of beat myself up over it. I'm like, oh my God, Casey, what is going on with you? Like you've become a total like loser, introvert. Like who are you that this is like, you don't want to do anything. And now I've just realized I've got to balance it. Or it's just too much.
Well, your values change, right? So what you valued in your 20s was going to look a little different than what you're valuing as you get older, right? And as your values are connected, I believe, to the things that matter to you, right? Obviously, it's what they are. That's going to be different. So in your 20s, maybe you were valuing having friends and going out. Like that was important for whatever reason. Like that was the thing that, same with me, most 20-year-olds, like they needed to be around their people at all times on top of each other. And so, as a social drain, that maybe didn't look like that, but I bet you there was somebody in that group that you maybe could have done without, at some point, there's some friend that you could have been like, I'm really feeling this person, but I don't know how to get rid of them. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's a drain, though. That's a drain. Even though you're like, okay, it's cool. We're being cool with each other. The fact that maybe you don't trust that person, or, you're not sure if they're, whatever it is, like that it'll show. It still was there. It was still there. It's just going to look a little different to what you're paying attention to. So I think as we get older, our values. So I have everyone do their core values when they work with me, because what I want them to first understand is, what were you taught, and does it still serve you? because we inherit a lot of things from our family and our friends and religion, and all these things formulate the values that people usually come to me with. And then after really looking at it, they may actually decide like, wow, like, no, those things actually are really obstacles for me. Like, this is maybe why I'm actually feeling so stifled or not good about myself or shamed, because I don't really feel strongly about any of those things. So now it's time to really create your core values for yourself. But even after doing that, I tell people, like, don't be so precious with it, because as you get older and your life changes and different experiences happen to you, you are going to start to value possibly something different. When you have your core values, once we've decided and you've really taken your time to comb through them, and you know which ones actually are yours and which ones no longer serve you, ones that you may have inherited from family or religion or whatever, society, then understanding that those core values may act as your North Star for now, and they will evolve. They will evolve. So some may not become as important in a few years to you. Maybe they go back into the general, group of values that you have behind you, and you pull up other ones to the forefront. But it's understanding that those values are going to directly affect, even energetically, what you're conscious of being pulled from you.
I love that. I love that because it's tying in some of my favorite things. So one, like maintaining a bigger picture perspective of things. So like those core values that can help kind of bring you up a level when you get just like too stuck in the weeds of life, but then also constantly like paying attention to how you feel. So like, where are those energetic drains, and, and kind of making changes where necessary, or honoring when you feel like you're just drained and need to rest. Cause that's another thing we don't do. Our society doesn't promote. And I think we as women especially don't do, because I don't know, we feel like we should always be go, go, go and give. I love those. And then also starting with the kind of at least questioning, if not completely letting go of some of the values or thought processes that we inherited, and kind of deciding like, okay, is this really right for my life?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those things become like rules, and I think it's okay to break them sometimes. I think it's okay to break them if they're no longer serving you. And that to me that's you looking at your whole entirety, like your whole being. I'm going to take care of every part of me, not just, my ambition, not just, my body. I'm going to look at the whole of who I am, and understanding that in order for me to even, feel like I really want to be operating on an optimal level, you've got to address everything, the whole entirety of who you are.
I love it. That is a great note to end on. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm definitely going to check out the your online sessions, because I want to do some of that sensual movement. Tell everybody where they can find you online, on the socials, follow you, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So I've got my website. You can go to anjuamaximo.com. And you will find everything there about the electric life coaching, the leadership essentials, Pure Mvmnt classes, all that lives there. You could follow me on Instagram under Anjua Maximo as well, and you'll find everything for Pure Mvmnt and electric life there. And then Facebook, not terribly active on, but I do have a page under Coach Anjua Maximo if you're looking for me there on Facebook.
Perfect. And I will link to all of that in the show notes, as well as the book you recommended. I'm probably going to check that out too, because I find how our brains work like super fascinating and helpful in the personal development space to understand the biology that's maybe working for you and what's maybe kind of working against you.
Yes, girl, I'm telling you, you will be like, wait, what? No, we're undoing that one. We're going to unlearn that one right now. Yeah. Yep. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. This was fun.
Thank you. Yes, it was a lot of fun. All right, that'll do it for this week. Thank you again for listening. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss episodes that are coming up. And you can also follow the podcast on the socials, Instagram and Facebook at The Better You Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a review or a rating on whatever podcast app you're listening on. That would be hugely helpful for me. If you have guest suggestions or topic requests, by all means, you can send those to me at thebetteryouPodcast@gmail.com. And I think that is it. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful week.